think we know what we got from the starting position. Bryce Boettcher coming back, Devon Jackson, one of the fastest pound-for-pound guys on this team coming back at linebacker over there. But then we talk about depth, a lot of depth in the D-line, but now the depth at the linebacker position. How do you assess the depth of guys like a Dylan Williams, Jerry Mixon, Braden Platt, and some of these other guys? And do you think that this spring is really a time for them to prove that they can be that capable option where when Bryce goes off the field, when Devon goes off the field, that there's not a big drop-off there?
Yeah, I think, we talked about receivers, and I very much see this room in a similar light, right? Bryce Boettcher is going to be out there, right? That's an absolute guarantee. He's going to be a leader of that defense. He's a guy. They were very fortunate to get him back for another year. I think Devon Jackson's a guy that we saw just really raised his profile exponentially last year. I think he's ready to take that next step this year. Those two guys are going to be the anchors out there, but there's still a lot of snaps to be had for Braden Platt and the others behind them, Dylan Williams. And Braden Platt's a guy that I mentioned him, first of all. I think he's the guy. I think you really look at him, you look at his physicality, you look at the fact Dan Lanning likes his linebackers that can move sideline to sideline. He doesn't want the big thumpers. I like those guys that can come up and hit, but he needs his linebackers to be able to move in space.
Yes.
And so you look at a guy like Braden Platt, who's a track and field guy, it has plenty good size. Dylan Williams is really good. Kamar Matudi got some run as well last year a little bit. And Jerry Mixon, this is his third year now. He's been in the program a couple years already. Yeah. I know he's nipped at the heels. So that to me is healthy competition. All those guys are going to be, fighting for the snaps and who might be first on in an injury or who might be first off when one of those guys needs a blow. There's snaps to be had there. So that will be another room, just like receiver, where I don't think we'll have the answer in the spring. It'll be later in the fall before we get a little bit clearer picture there.
That's good to see. Battles may be turning into wars as we go into fall camp. And if there's any place where battles are going to turn into wars, I saved this one for last for good reason. It's the defensive backfield. 5 guys out, 5 guys in. I call it the line change of Oregon football, certainly right now. And like the defensive line, you look at it from an outsider perspective, and be like, I don't know about that. But you let's kind of analyze what's coming in. Dylan Thieneman. Folks around the program saying he might be the best overall player on this football team. Certainly taking an upgrade at safety, the transfer out of Purdue. Theron Johnson, honorable mention All Big Ten, comes in from Northwestern. The rest of this, there's a lot of talented bodies, right? Like we talked about at the wide receiver position, certainly as well. Do you view any guys as favorites for some of these positions coming into spring football? I've heard some good returns from Ife Opadegwu, possibly Kingston Lopa and Peyton Woodyard, maybe over there at safety. We know Jaleel Florence has been around this program for a couple of years. Are there any guys in the laundry list of 4- and 5-star guys that are in this secondary that Chris Hampton has recruited to come in here that maybe lead the way as we kick off spring practice today?
Yeah, this is going to be a fun group to track as well. And like you said, you're gonna pencil Dylan Thieneman in one of those spots because that's happening. Like you said, the early talk about this guy has been they are very glad they spent the money on making sure this kid wanted to come to Oregon. And that's great because that's going to be a veteran presence to help bring some of these young guys along. I think you got to look at Jaleel Florence. I mean, I think there was maybe some talk at certain points about him maybe not coming back. What was kind of going on with him last year, injury, just all of that stuff. And like you said, that's a guy who's been around the program in a couple of years prior to his injury, was a really good football player, probably still a really good football player. Him and Ife, I think, are going to be 2 guys that really compete at the cornerback position all spring long. And again, it's probably not safe to assume Theron Johnson takes one of those cornerback spots, but it's probably not unreasonable all the same. So another guy there is Dakota Fields. That's a guy that I've heard a ton of stuff about Dakota Fields in this room. And that's what you want. If you're Dan Lanning, you're now in a position. Yes, he did have to use the transfer portal again in secondary, but you're now in a position between the classes you've signed and then this incoming class with Trey McNutt, Neem Offer, Dorian Brew, those guys that are going to be really good, and you're probably going to see them all on the field this year, to now basically maybe stop relying on the transfer portal to fill these spots. So that's going to be a really big key moving forward. And it's going to be interesting how this plays out with these guys, because this has implications for years, not just this season, for years, to see which of these young guys fill in and which spots are available maybe next year or the year after, whatever the case might be. So another fun group. And I know it just feels like I keep saying the same thing, but that's what makes this spring really fun for Oregon football. There are a lot of battles, a lot of positions, a lot of new faces. But at the end of the day, not all these faces are new. They've been around the program for a couple of years. They just haven't been the guy yet. And now's their opportunity. This is what Nick Saban did at Alabama so well. He would get these 4 and 5 stars and put them in behind other 4 and 5 stars. And then when those guys took off, it was the next group that came in, and they were already playing elevated football. And I think that's what we're seeing Dan Lanning looking to do here at Oregon.